Welcome back to Tech Talk. I'm Greg Schaefer. Dr. Pamela Gay is back with us today. Really excited to continue our conversation with her. She is, of course, the senior scientist at the Planetary Institute. Planetary Science Institute. She is also the co-host of Astronomy Cast, host of Escape Velocity Space News, and does a whole lot more. Dr. Gay, thank you so much for joining us again.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I love new shows getting a start and getting to be part of seeing you on your climb.
Well, I appreciate that. I'm looking forward to discussing more about everything space related. Of course, as I mentioned before, I have been a huge amateur space fan. I guess you can call me a fan of citizen science. And I know you talk a lot about that on your website at starstrider.com. But can you explain a little bit, first of all, what is citizen science?
The basic idea of citizen science is any of us have the ability to look out at this universe that we share, whether it be with our eyes, with our telescopes, or using software to explore existing data. And what makes someone a citizen scientist versus a professional scientist is citizen scientists are just volunteers. They're people who dedicate their time to expanding what we know by looking, reporting what they see, and sharing it out to people who help use it to publish papers. So I, as a professional researcher, get paid to work with people who are volunteering hours for projects ranging from looking to see when that nova goes off this summer somewhere in the sky. We hope we're waiting for a star that we know gets significantly brighter every few decades to do its thing, who we're looking at people who are reporting comets as they plunge into the sun. We're working with people, with my project in particular, who are willing to help us map out the surface of other worlds in our solar system, because there's still things that our human eyes and brain can do that software can't. And until computer vision gets a whole lot better, we need everyday people to help us map out other worlds in our solar system.
Does somebody have to have credentials or a degree or pass a test, or can it literally be anybody with in the case of astronomy, with a telescope and a desire?
In general, we require people to demonstrate a certain level of skill. For instance, the Minor Planet Center in Boston, they take in asteroid data collected by people all over the world who are looking at the sky and often discovering new asteroids just crossing through their images. Now, for the Minor Planet Center to be able to say, yes, you who we've never met before, yes, you have discovered a new asteroid, those people need to submit data on known objects that demonstrate the capabilities of them, their equipment, and their process. Once those folks get validated, they can go off and discover new objects. With the stuff we do with fully online citizen science, we have training images that we have people go through, and they mark out what they see in these images. And using those training images, we can say, yeah, this is someone who's actually doing a valid job and not somebody's cat that has absconded with the mouse and is trying to do science. And so there's a validation to everything that gets done, but anyone who's willing to take the time to learn a process can participate. And it's something where, if you think about it, we've always been engaging students in helping us in our research. And why can't someone like you be my peer, my colleague, my student who's learning the process?
You know, I'm going to reach back to my memory back more than 20, 25 years ago. And I'm going to guess 96, but I might be off by a little bit. And one of the coolest things that I remember as sort of an astronomy nerd was when, and correct me if I'm wrong, but a comet broke apart and collided and basically was sucked up by Jupiter. Shoemaker-Levy, I think it was, or Levy, if I'm pronouncing it correctly.
Shoemaker-Levy 9, that was the summer, I believe, of 1993. I was
off by
working
a few
at
years.
Peak Observatory. Yeah, well, I was there at the observatory as a student when this happened. And so it's a strong memory for me. It was the first time I ever used this thing we call the internet today. And so it was a really cool summer.
But they were not citizen science advisors or
Levy
anything.
was.
Oh, let me.
So here's the thing about those discoverers. It was Eugene Shoemaker, who is a planetary scientist, or he was. He's now passed away. But David Levy, he's an English major. He's a writer. He's someone who's been doing amateur astronomy since he was a small child. And over the decades of his life, he memorized so much of the sky that he could look out and say, yes, that field that has this fuzzy thing in it, that fuzzy thing wasn't there yesterday. We have now discovered a comet. And this was one of his passions that he did with his own personal equipment sitting outside.
So I guess then that could probably be one of the more famous examples of a citizen science
Discovery.
contribution to astronomy.
Yeah,
Because I was going to ask, well,
exactly.
what's a really good one, and there's one right there. That's amazing that anybody can just, with the passion and of course with some vetting, actually be a part of this. But it's sometimes difficult for folks in the general public because some of this can be really complex. I know as a science fiction fan, I always get a little bit disturbed and perturbed whenever I hear or see, I'm sure you do too, where they kind of really mess up astronomy in shows. Like,
Yeah.
Earth is like rotating in the galaxy or something like that, or we're in multiple galaxies, right? Or something along those lines. So there are some complex things going on here. Just the idea of orbital mechanics and how a comet would hit a planet, for example. But you
Mhm.
seem to be able to make these complex scientific concepts consumable by the public, which I think is wonderful. How do you do that?
It's honestly just we each have different things that we're passionate about doing. I too am completely a lover of science fiction, and if any of you out there ever need a science advisor for your science fiction, I am here for you. And growing up, I just wanted to understand all the science in these stories that I loved, all of the science that inspired the names that of the characters. For instance, in Battlestar Galactica, that was my first passion. And along the way, everyone's like, "Hey, what are you doing?" And when you're a kid, you learn to either get beat up or break things down into terms that make things interesting to your peers. And I was that spacey, geeky child from second grade on who was trying to explain space, trying to get other people interested, writing fan fiction. I was that kind of a nerd as a youngling.
Mhm.
Um, and I just kept going. And the first time I ever gave a public talk on astronomy was actually when I was in high school. I'd gone as part of a peacekeeping exchange to the Soviet Union to study at the 6 Meter Observatory. And when I came back, I was asked to talk about that observatory. And here I was, a kid, talking to a room full of people old enough to be my parents and grandparents about my time on the top of a mountain, half a world away. And I wanted to make them both know I understood my science and make them understand my science. And that's been my goal ever since, to make sure I understand what I'm doing at such a deep level that I can make somebody else both care about it and also understand it at least a surface level.
I remember not directly. I was a little bit too young for this, but during what would be, I guess, considered one of the golden ages of space exploration during the 60s. It
Yeah.
captured the imagination of children, the moon landing with Apollo 11. I was only 2 at the time, that's why I didn't remember that, but I did remember one of the later ones. I think probably the last one, which I think was 17.
Yeah.
Lots happened in space exploration, and that was also the beginning of the golden age of sci-fi. You had Star Trek, which was a radically different show, showed us being able to
Yes.
get to planets just almost like that. You mentioned Battlestar Galactica. Of course, Star Wars was during this time as well too. So
Yeah.
we've kind of grown up with the idea that it should be so easy to get to planets, but it's really not that easy
No.
because of the vast distances. So we're currently looking at eventually trying to get to Mars, maybe in our
Yeah,
lifetimes that might happen. But what
hopefully.
are some of your thoughts as far as space exploration? Obviously, we're not going to see anything outside of the solar system as far as human travel goes. So let's keep it like kind of local to the local solar
Yeah.
system.
So this is one of these things where it all comes down to how much money are the nations of the world willing to put into space exploration. Going to
Mm,
space is an endeavor that requires multinational cooperation. It requires thousands of people working to innovate new technologies that have never existed before. And this isn't a cheap process. This is actually something I'm doing a lot of writing on lately because of NASA's current plans to return to the moon with the Artemis missions and the unfortunate recent cancellation of the Viper rover, that it just got so over budget that in order to keep everything else going, for want of $100 million, a completed mission has been canceled. All it
mm,
needed was to be launched. And so we have to find the willingness to say, we're going to spend what is necessary to ensure our astronauts get to space safe, stay in space safe and healthy, which means solving radiation problems, solving nutrition problems. How do we feed people on these long duration missions? And then we have to develop all of the technology that allows them to not just go there, but come back. We were working towards testing some ideas with the Mars sample return mission, which is, again, also something that is on the edge of cancellation because the budget that NASA has is just so small and has been held flat for so many years,
mm.
while the costs of facilities, the costs of everything associated with doing science is actually rising slightly faster than inflation. So if you hold NASA's budget flat relative to inflation, but all the costs are going up, that means that year on year, we're actually seeing a decrease in the money available to do science. And we can't do the innovation necessary if we don't have the money to pay humans and develop the technologies that allows us to become a multiplanetary species.
Which is so unfortunate because we've learned so much from exploration and some of
Yes.
our technologies. If we couldn't do a lot of the communication that we do, the internet, a lot of that came from satellite communications, and even Tang, I remember back in the day, followed. So, well, Dr. Gay, we could talk about this for hours on end. I find
Yes.
it fascinating. Really appreciate you taking time out to chat a little bit more space with us today.
Always happy to be here. Always happy to come back. Thank you for this opportunity to talk about things I love on your wonderful new show.
Oh, I appreciate you coming on, and we'll be right back.